Hello, I am Blarchar, and I beat Pokemon Infinite Fusion using only Steel-type Pokemon. Skip to the time shown on screen now, if you just want to get to the run. This time around, I'll be playing on Modern Mode, with randomized Pokemon in the wild, but keeping trainers the same because it still crashes the game. If you're curious about how Infinite Fusion works, check out the description below. I've also set up a Discord server, check out the description for that as well, to hang out with other fans of the channel and to get notifications for future streams and videos. Let's get into it. This time around I just went with a random name, Teresa. I don't even know at this point. Anyway, Teresa loses to my Charmander as is usually the case. For this video I'm going to skip most of the rival battles unless something crazy happens. If you want to see all the rival battles in the game, I've highlighted them all in the previous videos, and a lot of them in the 2 stream VODs for the Steel-type run. I catch myself a Clang fused with Paris in an early area, and fuse the Clang with another Clang, since Clang doesn't have a whole lot of custom fusion sprites. At least this gets a bit of extra experience for being fused with itself. I make it all the way to Pewter City without finding any other Steel types, so I fight Brock with a single double fused Clang. Brock is pretty easy anyway, even with his Modern Mode Steel-type team, and so Clanang is able to take out both of his Pokemon. I did want to show his Steed Jr. real quick, since it's a really nice sprite, and it reminds me a bit of the final area of Scarlet and Violet with the Terra Crystals. I find a Solosis to fuse with one of my Clangs and make a decent looking Solowang. I also wanted to show you another cool sprite, which is Jigglypuff fused with Clang. If you don't know what this is, you're probably too young to be watching my channel. I also fused my Charmander with a Bidoof earlier and yeah, don't be surprised if you see this guy show up later on. It's basically become a mascot for the Discord server at this point. I move on to Misty in the Cerulean Gym, who has Ice-type Pokemon, and I still don't have another Steel-type, so I take Solowang in alone again. Her Glyro goes down on one hit, and her Manras is a bit bulkier, but with some consistent gear grinding, it goes down too. However, I find a mother load of Steel types on the route east of Vermilion City. I find a Honedge fused with Riolu, which is 2 Steel types for 1 Pokeball. There's also a Ferroseed, a Piplup who will eventually become a Steel type Empoleon, and a Beldum who legitimately took about a half hour to catch due to it being as hard to catch as any legendary. I fuse Honedge with Kirlia with the intention of eventually evolving it into Gallade at the request of someone watching on the stream. I also fuse Beldum with Larvitar, which is funny looking. I also fuse Ferroseed with Smeargle with the intention of making it a defensive powerhouse later on in the game, but I never actually use it later on, so you just get the cool fusion sprite right now. Now that my Riolu has evolved into Lucario, I fuse it with a Bayleaf I found to make Bayario, which looks pretty nice. Now that I have a lot more Pokemon on my team, I take on Lieutenant Surge who uses fighting types, which Solowang should deal with pretty easily. Nosekey goes down to a couple moves, and Houndblade falls to a lucky critical hit gear grind. Fletch Chop gets crumpled instantly as well. The gym seems easier on Modern Mode than on regular mode now that I've done both. I head back to earlier routes to find more Steel-type Pokemon and find a really cool looking Smeargle Mawile fusion. I fuse Mawile with a Rotom the wrong way around just to see its sprite, and I really like the wood chipper design they give it. Honestly, most Rotom fusions are awesome. I reverse the fusion, and the Maytom sprite looks pretty cute. I also fuse Aeron with Bulbasaur, and it's also cute. However, I realize that gives me 2 Pokemon 4 times weak to fire, with Bayario also being a grass type, so I fuse Aeron with Kadabra instead, and I'm surprised the Abra sprite looks pretty decent. While in the Celadon sewers with my girlfriend Erika, my Bayario evolves into Megario. My Honlia also evolves, and I accidentally forget I'm supposed to evolve it into Gallade, and although the Honvoire sprite looks amazing, I have to unfuse it, since Aegislash and Gardevoir is one of the most overused fusions I see in the community. I fuse Honedge with Staryu instead. To make up for that, I fuse Gardevoir with my new Empoleon, which looks alright. The reversed fusion also looks fine. I then fuse Empoleon with Piplup and make an adorable Impolup. Eventually, however, I end up with a Mageleon, hoping for an awesome Gyarados fusion sprite. While grinding up to fight Giovanni in the sewers, Kadabra and Aeron fusion evolves into a Libra, and it's pretty good looking. My Mageleon evolves, and although the sprite isn't custom, I still have hope and go to the PC to reverse the fusion, and I am so happy with what I see. I make it to Giovanni in the sewers, and this is the final straw for me. I started out this series with an unspoken no items during battle rule, kind of like a hardcore Nuzlocke. However, I was so unprepared for this fight due to its unique challenges that I had to resort to using so many items during it. I beat the fight the second time around, I think, but it was kind of annoying that probably more than half the fight are spent using items. So, I'm gonna take the rare candy pill. I'm using the game's in-game debug mode. I won't be cheating. Pokemon IVs will be normal, but everything else I can change legitimately, I will. I'll give my Pokemon actual decent EVs, which I could do legitimately, but that would just take so much time. And I'll try to make teams that can actually deal with certain fights. This should work out well for both me and you, my viewers. I get to actually do fights without having to spam items, and you get to see a lot more fusions and custom sprites. It should also let me get these videos out a little bit more consistently. Anyway, I fused Metang with Marshtomp, and Metomp looks goofy as heck. I head into Erika's gym afterward, and I'm so tired at this point, I just try and muscle my way through. After this point, I stopped streaming this run, and so was free to start being more creative with my teams. The battles are the only interesting part anyway, nobody wants to see hours of grinding and item collecting. Before we move on though, I wanted to show you this fusion of Slugma and Lily. Moving on. I realized that my team has a die or ground weakness, and so fuse a Steelix with a Fearow to get Fearlix, and although this guy looks funny as hell, it's actually kinda busted later on. I also fuse Forretress with Slowbro, and although I love the sprite, I don't end up using it. I find a Skarmory fused with Remoraid in the wild and catch it in order to use later. I also find a few new steel types in the Safari Zone, Shieldon, Scizor, and Magnemite. Before I fight Koga, I try and evolve a few fusions. Honyu evolves into Doyu, and Libra evolves into Lycazam, both of which are not custom sprites. I use a Water and Dust Stone on Doyu to evolve both halves into their final forms, and the Age of Me that comes of it is legitimately awesome. In preparation for Koga's gym, which is Dark type, I catch a bunch of Fighting type Pokemon to fuse with my Steel Pokemon. I fuse the Skarmory I caught earlier with Breloom, which makes a cool looking Skarloom. I also fuse Magnezone with Machamp and get an awesome Frankenstein's monster-like Magnachamp. I also fuse Scizor with Poliwrath and get Cyrath, and I don't know why they made its belly region this sickly yellow color. Since I'm having trouble finding a fusion for Probopass, I fuse it with the Universal Sprite Donor Clefable and get a perfect looking Clefpass. I also fuse Pawniard with a Shedinja, making a decent looking Shedyard. Finally, I fuse Bastiodon with Ariados, and this thing is absolutely amazing! I move on to Koga and use Shedyard, Magnachamp, Cyrath, and Clefpass. His first Pokemon is a Zoroark Reuniclus fusion disguised as an Umbreon Torterra, which goes down to one quad-effective X-Scissor. Weaflame takes out Shedyard, and in comes Clefpass to take it out in 2 turns. Honchkrow is next, and it can't do much damage to me while I whittle it down. Last out is the real Mterra, and it also falls to a few new Ice Beams and Cyrath submission. After clearing out Silphco and Saffron, I head into Sabrina's gym with mostly the same theme, since she uses Fairy types, and every Pokemon I have super effective Steel-type moves. I start out with Cyrath, who takes out her Silvolosion, and a Metal Claw almost one-shots her Marowak. Skarloom's Steel Wing one-shots after Sabrina heals it though. Driftrill almost goes down to a single Steel Wing too, but then I get burned and due to Aftermath, Skarloom falls too. Magnachamp tries taking out Cleflix, but with a combination of Wish and Natural Bulk, Cleflix is able to outlast Magnachamp, and I send in my last, Ariadon. I'm unable to take out Cleflix with Ariadon alone, so I do have to resort to healing items in this fight, but if Sabrina can use some, so can I. Eventually, its defenses are way too high due to Cosmic Power, so I have to switch to Magnachamp eventually after reviving it, so I have a better chance against its special defense, rather than its insane defense. It goes down eventually. Turns out I should have actually made a custom team for this fight. After leaving Saffron, I head back to the PC to unfuse Aggron from Kadabra in order to fuse it with Rhyperior and get an awesome Agrior. The website that I use for the fusion sprites you see on screen doesn't have this specific sprite for Agrior, so I have to screenshot it myself and just paste that on the screen. I could use an image editor to make the background transparent, but that's just too much work for me, obviously. I work out a team to take on ZapMolCuno effortlessly. Fearlix, Ariadon, Clefpass, and Agrior all can learn Rock Slide, which will hit all 3 heads of ZapMolCuno with super effective damage. In an insane bit of luck, Clefpass survives a triple attack and gets off a Rock Slide, and I learn each head holds a Charty Berry, reducing damage from Rock-type moves. Smart. They finish off Clef Pass, and I try out Ariadon next, who falls to Flamethrower. However, Agrior is somehow able to outspeed the birds, and knocks out 2 of the heads with its next Rock Slide. Zapdos falls to a last Rock Slide, and I think I have my strategy for all the remaining times I fight ZapMolCuno. Preparing for Blaine's Psychic-type gym, I fuse Empoleon with Zoroark, making a great Emporoark, and I love its white hair with black tips. I also fuse together Dusknoir and Bisharp for a Duskshart, which looks great. On to Blaine. His Klinkferig falls in a few Shadow Punches. Xano almost falls to 1 X-Scissor, so Blaine switches to Togeniclus, who falls to back-to-back Shadow Punches. Xano comes back in to take another punch to the face, and Allosaur is last in, who finally takes out Duskshart. Since Allosaur only has Psychic and Sludge Bomb as its attacking moves, it has to resort to useless recovers while I sleep, and then one-shot it with Night Daze. Blaine turned out to just be a pushover this time around. Since Giovanni's gym is normal type, I fuse Gengar with Lucario instead of Meganium, and get an amazing looking Gennario, who turns out to be a crazy good special attacker. My final team for Giovanni is on the left side. He leads with a cool Ketgon, and I set up Stealth Rock and Sandstorm, then realize it's actually Giovanni's Zoroark Persian, as I finally knock it out while wasting Giovanni's potions. In next is Porylurk, and I send in Emporoark, disguised as Gennario, in order to avoid super effective ground-type moves. I get paralyzed though and die to an Earthquake. Then I send out the real Gennario to knock out with Dark Pulses. Cubone is next, and I try to use Destiny Bond to knock it out, but Cubone keeps trying to use Sucker Punch, wasting my Destiny Bond PP, and Gennario eventually falls to an Outrage. Magnachamp comes in to clean up with Flash Cannon. Ketgon knocks out Magnachamp with Earthquake, and Skarloom is last. Sky Uppercut KOs Ketgon, and I get so close to losing with Skarloom, but a Night Slash finishes us off with Smeargar. I was heavily breathing at this point, thinking I'd have to redo that fight. I fight the rival, then move on to the Elite Four. I really thought hard on a good team to take into the Elite Four, and decided on a bunch of Pokemon with various resistances and immunities. Magnezone and Politoed with Water Absorb, Ninetales and Aegislash with Flash Fire. Fearlix and Gennario are Flying and Levitate to be immune to ground moves. Clefpass has Magic Guard, so it's a decent tank, and Agrior has Lightning Rod. In all, I have immunities to 8 different types and resistances to many more, so this shouldn't be a crazy hard Elite Four. I realize some people might want to see the stats, items, natures, abilities, and moves my team has, so here's a rundown. Fearlix has Bright Powder and Sturdy to try to avoid and survive attacks while it sets up Stealth Rock and Sandstorm. Magnetoad is a special attacker with Wise Glasses and Water Absorb. Agrion has a Choice Band to take advantage of its massive attack stat. Clefpass is the same, but with Choice Specs for its special attack instead. Agitails is stuck in shield form since it doesn't have stance change, so I gave it leftovers for longevity. And Gennario has naturally high special attack, so I give it a Choice Scarf to make sure it outspeeds everything, especially if it has to Destiny Bond something. I head in to fight Lorelei. I set up both Stealth Rock and Sandstorm against Polyleon, then switch into Magnetoad to absorb Polyleon's Bubble Beam. I try whittling it down, but it's pretty bulky, so I go for Scald and Burns to eventually take it down. Next is Swampray, so I switch into Gennario to counter the Earthquake with Levitate. 2 Shadow Balls take it out, and then I fall to Gyaraku. Next up is Agitails to knock out with a couple extra sensories. Milotina is next, and I burn it with Will-O-Wisp while it almost knocks me out. I then switch into Magnetoad to absorb the Hydro Pump, then go for Ice Beams. I switch out to Clefpass to resist Aura Sphere, and knock out with Moonblast finally. Lorelei sends in a choice item Kingdrio, so I switch back again to Magnetoad since I know it's using Waterfall. She switches out as I use Thunder Wave in to Spear Mewtwo, then I use my special moves over and over as it keeps trying to use Counter. Kingdrio comes in next to immediately thanks to Stealth Rock, finishing up Lorelei's team. Next up, Bruno leads with Tyrant Flame, who U-turns into Probodon while I Stealth Rock. I feint to 1 Eruption and send in Agrion, then change my mind and go into Agitails instead to absorb that Eruption. It uses Solar Beam, which deals pitiful damage, but I can't do much damage myself. We trade weak blows, but I win the War of Attrition. Bruno sends in Marario, which is dangerous for Agitails, so I send in Gennario to dodge the ground moves. It knocks out with 2 Aura Spheres and Tyrant Flame comes back in. I go for Clefpass in order to use Ice Beam, but Tyrant Flame U-turns again and switches with Octostar. I switch back into Magnetoad to absorb water moves, but get Ice Beamed instead and Frozen Solid. I thaw the next turn thankfully, and we trade weak moves like normal before switching into Agriar to finish it off with Earthquake. Bruno sends out Armatops, who's also choice banded, so I switch into Ganaryo, knowing it'll use Superpower, giving me a free turn to Shadow Ball it while it stays in for some reason. Bruno sends Tyrant Flame Blackout, and Shadow Ball is able to knock it out too. Cragray is up next and is able to take me out. I send in Agrior, who destroys it with its recently learned Heavy Slam. Armatops' superpower almost one-shots me, but I'm able to Heavy Slam again and crush it into the dirt, finishing it off Bruno. I heal up and move on to Agatha. She leads Clefraid, who I remember sets up Toxic Spikes, so I try to one-shot it with Drill Peck, but it doesn't work, so I go for my normal Stealth Rocks. It tries to minimize, but you can't dodge the Sandstorm. Chandabok is up next, who falls in a couple Drill Pecks. Next is Kroros, who knocks out Fearless with Discharge. I send in Agriar, who one-shots with Earthquake, since it's 4 times effective. Dusk Bloom comes out next, who also falls in 1 Earthquake. Umzing is a bit tougher and has Levitate, so I switch to Clef Pass. Umzing just likes to spam Pain Split, so I whittle it down with Moonblast over a few turns, eventually knocking it out. Last up is Muo, and I know it's going to use Sacred Fire, so I switch to Age of Tales to absorb it. This is another battle I wish I had Haze in, because it starts spamming Recover and Minimize, which is really annoying. Eventually, I'm able to get it down thanks to its burn and a few lucky hits with Flamethrower. Agatha wasn't the easiest Elite Four this time, that would be Lorelei, but still she was relatively easy. Last of the Elite Four is Lance. I set up against his Toga Flame, then switch into Ganaryo to attack with Flash Cannon, which knocks out in 1 hit. He then sends out Dark Knight, leading with the legendary fusion early it seems. I go for Flash Cannon, since I'm choiced in, but it knocks out with Fire Blast. I send in Age of Tales to be safe from the Fire Blast, and I'm able to burn it and then switch out to Clef Pass to resist its Dark and Dragon moves while I knock it out. Chandamori is next, and it misses its attack while I one-shot with Ice Beam. Skepdactyl is next out, which knocks me out, but my Magnetoad knocks it out with Ice Beam. His Dubbat comes up and spams Iron Head while I'm asleep, then I wake back up and knock it out pretty easily. Last up is Aegimance, who almost falls to Magnetoad but knocks it out. Age of Tales comes back out to finish it off, completing the fight with Lance. Against Teresa the champion, I set up against their Ninsharp as it sets up Sword Stance and Speed Boost in order to Baton Pass it to Tertunion. Unfortunately for Teresa, I live its Fair Blitz due to Sturdy and knock it out with a couple Drill Pecks, wasting all of Ninsharp's setup. Out comes Chandabile, and Fearlix was going to faint anyway, so I decided to just get an extra turn to Sandstorm damage on it, as well as its burn. I send in Age of Tales and alternate King's Shields with Exosensory in order to get the most out of its burn in Sandstorm. Eventually I'm able to take it out, and next out is Axemen's. I forget it has Earthquake, so I lose Age of Tales, and I'm not thinking straight since I'm so close to the end, and lose Magnetoad to Earthquake as well. I come to my senses and send in Ganaryo to knock it out with a couple Shadow Balls. Ryurion and Umbreon fusion comes next, and Shadow Ball won't do great damage, so I switch into Clef Pass instead. Moonblast deals good damage and knocks out Ryurion in 2 hits, and A-Ray is up next, who has 2 normal type moves, so I switch into Ganaryo. I get Thunderbolted though, which almost knocks me out, but I get off an Aura Sphere as A-Ray misses Stone Edge, and I get the knockout. Ninsharp is last up, who falls to Agrion's Earthquake, giving me the win. Man, here's some extra fusions as thanks for making it to the end of the video. For sure, this was the second easiest mono-type run after Dragon. Steel-type is pretty powerful defensively as long as you cover for its weaknesses. I tried streaming the first half of the game, but ended up not enjoying it as much as I would just recording it offline. I think I'll keep streams to games other than Infinite Fusion, or maybe just sticking to post-game or something. Also, now that I've been rare candy pilled, thanks Peach Owl, these runs shouldn't take nearly as much work to get out, so I might not get burned out on it so easily. I want to thank everyone for 2,000 subscribers as well. This is just insane. I know it's not a lot, but I couldn't fit that many people in my apartment, which is just weird to think about. Hopefully I can keep improving so that my videos get better to watch. Keep giving me your advice though. I do actually read a lot of the comments. For example, someone said not to use items so much since it removes tension in battles and makes them less fun. And although I was having trouble with those battles, I ended up agreeing in the end. Anyway, the next 2 runs will be Poison and then Bug type. I'll try to get those out a tiny bit faster, but I'm not promising any dates at all, since I did that for this video and it was entirely produced, start to finish, the day it came out. That being, I wrote the script, recorded my lines, and edited the whole video together. Procrastination is awful, let me tell you, but you probably already know. I'm recording this at 8:08 p.m. right now, so that's Central Time as well. So look at your time at that time that you watch this. Yeah, it's probably pretty close. Well, anyway, that should be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a nice one.